Hi, I'm Rihanna Callista. When my grandmother died, I inherited $10 billion and a war I didn't ask for. The first thing my own mother said was, "Sign it over or stop calling me Mom." So I packed my suitcase. I walked away from the family name, the cameras, the legacy. But what they didn't know was how far I'd go to protect what she built. Fake wills, public betrayal, and secrets that could ruin them. They tried to erase me. But now, I'm the one telling the story. How do you survive a family that wants you erased? The sky above Charleston was gray that morning, like the world itself had muted out of respect for my grandmother. The estate smelled of magnolias and sea air, though nothing about the day felt alive. People dressed in black drifted between the hedges, whispering polite things that didn't mean a thing. I stood at the back, near the marble fountain Callista had imported from Italy, watching as strangers comforted one another over a woman they barely knew. No one came near me. Not a single eye turned in my direction. It wasn't the first time I had felt invisible in this house, but it was the first time the silence felt so final. When the pastor closed his Bible and murmured, "May she rest in peace," everyone bowed their heads. My mother didn't. Vera held her chin high, staring straight ahead like she was posing for a photograph. Bryn, my older sister, dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief, the kind you cry into when you want to look good doing it. The crowd began to scatter toward the mansion for refreshments, polite laughter already sneaking back into the air. I stayed behind, watching the groundskeepers pull away the chairs. That's when Lucian, our family lawyer, approached. He was an older man, soft-spoken, the kind of person who always looked slightly tired from carrying too many secrets. "Rihanna," he said, his voice barely above the wind, "your mother asked that we all meet in the study once the guests leave. It's about the will." Of course it was. An hour later, we gathered in the study, a room that smelled of bourbon, dust, and old anger. The curtains were drawn, muting the sunlight into a copper haze. Vera sat behind the mahogany desk, where Callista once signed every business contract that built her empire. Bryn lounged on the couch, scrolling her phone like she couldn't be bothered. Lucian took his seat at the edge of the desk and unfolded a thick, cream-colored envelope. The sound of the paper alone silenced us. "I'll read directly," he said. "The last will and testament of Callista Beaumont." My breath caught. Lucian continued, steady and calm, the words spilling like a tide. "I, Callista Beaumont, being of sound mind and memory, do hereby bequeath the entirety of my estate, including all liquid assets, real properties, trusts, and holdings, to my granddaughter, Rihanna Beaumont." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. Bryn gasped. "Wait, what?" Lucian cleared his throat, repeating the key phrase slowly. "To my granddaughter, Rihanna Beaumont." The room went so still I could hear the clock ticking above the fireplace. Vera didn't move. Her manicured fingers tightened around the armrest. Then she gave a short, sharp laugh that didn't sound like her. "You must be joking." "It's all written here," Lucian said quietly. "Callista signed it 2 months before her passing." My mother's expression hardened, as if she'd been waiting for a reason to unleash something heavy she'd kept locked for years. She rose, every movement precise, like a general preparing for battle. "You," she spat. "You get everything. You walked out of this family years ago, and now you waltz back in to take what's ours." I swallowed hard. "Mom, I didn't even know she—" "Don't call me that," she snapped. "You were her little charity project, not mine." Lucian shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Beaumont, perhaps we should—" But Vera cut him off. "No, let her hear this. You think you can just show up, smile for the cameras, and walk away with everything Callista built? You didn't earn a thing. You never cared about us." Her words hit harder than I expected. I tried to steady my voice. "I never wanted her money. You know that. I only wanted her legacy to stay intact." "Then sign it over," Vera said, slamming her hand on the desk. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Sign it all over right now, or stop calling me Mom." For a moment, everything froze. Even Bryn stopped pretending to scroll her phone. My pulse pounded in my ears. I looked at the papers, at the careful signature of my grandmother written in her familiar looping script. "You mean you'd rather disown me than let me manage her estate?" Vera's eyes flashed. "Don't twist this. You don't have the experience or the name. You'll ruin everything she built. She built it, I said softly. Not you. Her face changed, not with rage, but something worse, humiliation. Lucian cleared his throat again, awkwardly closing the folder. Perhaps it's best we reconvene in a few days. Emotions are. Keep it, Vera hissed, gesturing toward the folder like it was poisoned. Keep it all. Let's see how long you last. I stood, my chair scraping the hardwood floor. I'll need time to think, I said. My voice surprised me, calm, almost detached. I looked at Lucian. Please send me a copy. He nodded silently. Then I turned to my mother. Her eyes were cold, the kind of cold that burns instead of freezes. I realized then that she had never looked at me, not really. I was just a mirror of everything she resented. I walked out without another word. The hallway stretched long and narrow, lined with portraits of ancestors who all seemed to be watching the drama unfold. Outside, the air felt heavier. The garden was quiet except for the faint hum of cicadas. I followed the stone path toward the back, where my grandmother's favorite white roses grew in perfect rows. They were in full bloom, untouched by the funeral chaos. I sat on the low wall near the fountain, clutching the envelope Lucian had slipped into my hands before I left. Inside was the official copy of the will. My name was printed clearly on the first page, no confusion, no mistake. For a long time, I just stared at it. Why me? I whispered to no one. The sound of laughter floated from inside the house, Bryn maybe, trying to smooth things over with Vera. It sounded distant, hollow, like it belonged to another world entirely. The sun had dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of gold and ash. I closed my eyes, hearing Callista's voice in my memory. Rihanna, strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. I wasn't sure what kind of strength I had left, but I knew one thing. Nothing in that house would ever be the same again. As I rose to leave, the envelope felt heavier in my hand. I walked past the rose bushes, past the stone angel statue Callista once said guarded the estate. My footsteps crunched on the gravel, each one sounding louder than the last. When I reached the gate, I turned back once, the mansion glowing faintly under the fading sun. It looked beautiful from the outside. It always did. But for the first time, I saw it for what it truly was, a cage built of money, secrets, and love turned into currency. And I was the only one holding the key. They say grief has stages, but what no one tells you is how quietly betrayal slips into the room when your back is turned. After the funeral, my grandmother's estate transformed into a muted echo of what it once was, no longer vibrant with her laughter, but hushed and immaculate, curated like a museum exhibit. The ballroom, once the site of her infamous summer soirees, had been reworked for the reception. Long velvet drapes softened the edges of the cold architecture. Tables shimmered with crystal, white roses floated in shallow bowls. It was tasteful, clinical. And then the slideshow began. Guests moved in with murmurs and drinks. A soft melody floated in the background, Debussy, I think. A projector hummed. Across the wall bloomed decades of memories in slow rotation, images of Callista's life, from black and white photographs of her youth to vibrant family gatherings. There was Vera, radiant in her 20s, standing beside my grandmother at a garden party. Bryn, clumsy in braces, blowing candles from a triple-tiered cake. My father, his arm around Grandma as they toasted in front of the fireplace. Photo after photo, laughing faces, holidays, weddings, christenings. But I was nowhere, not in a single frame. I stood there, motionless, as the air grew colder around me. It wasn't just oversight, it was deliberate absence, like I had been erased from the history of her life. Someone whispered behind me, "Must be glitches in the file." Then a too familiar voice, flat and indifferent. "It's just a technical thing. No one meant anything by it." "Vera." I turned. Her expression was composed, almost bored. Bryn beside her offered a wide-eyed, saccharine smile like everything was fine. But I knew what I felt in that moment. That bitterness crawling up my throat wasn't from grief. It was dismissal. Intentional, razor-sharp exclusion. I didn't speak. I scanned the room until my eyes caught Lucian, my cousin, the only one who'd ever met me halfway with honesty. He stood by the dessert table, silently nursing a glass of wine, avoiding my gaze. I approached him. "Lucian," I said low, "did Grandma ever ask to remove my photos from anything?" He glanced at me, startled. "No. She'd never," his voice dropped. "She didn't make that slideshow. That was the family committee. Vera led it." "Of course," I muttered. "The family committee." He looked apologetic, but that didn't change anything. Minutes later, I found the printed obituary, stacked neatly beside the condolence book. The paper was heavy, the kind chosen to signify respect. I read through the lines, noting every detail. Beloved matriarch, devoted philanthropist, survived by. The list was long. Vera, Bryn, their children, my uncles, even second cousins. Everyone had a name. Except me. No Rihanna. No granddaughter from the son who died too young, too soon. I felt the edges of the page dig into my fingers as I gripped it tighter. The heat of humiliation rose in my ears, then ebbed into a cold realization. This wasn't just about forgetting. This was erasure. The final curtain call, and I hadn't even been allowed on stage. I walked back to Lucian. "Did Grandma leave notes about the obituary?" I asked. He shook his head slowly. "She only planned the will. The rest, they filled in themselves." His eyes, for once, couldn't meet mine. "I'm sorry." I didn't answer. What was there to say? I retreated upstairs to my old bedroom, tucked at the end of the west wing, untouched since I was 17. The soft pastel wallpaper still lined the walls, faded and peeling at the corners. My small vanity sat beneath the window. A row of childhood recital photos still framed neatly along the wall. A museum of someone they tried to forget. I opened the drawer of the vanity and found the small leather-bound journal Grandma had gifted me when I was 13. The pages still smelled faintly of lavender. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened to a blank page. I wrote, "I will not vanish tonight. I will find another way to honor her name." I folded the page neatly, slipped it into an envelope, and left it on the dresser. No signature. No proof I was even there. Just a promise. Then I left. No one saw me go. No one called after me. I walked the halls of that estate, each corridor a monument to other people's legacies. Portraits of Vera and Bryn hung where my father's photos had once been. I passed the parlor where I once sang duets with Grandma at the piano. The keys now sat silent, gathering dust under a glass dome. By dusk, I was in my car. I drove aimlessly until I reached a modest motel near King Street, far from the glittering gates of the estate. The city lights shimmered faintly across Charleston Harbor. I parked, rolled down the window, and let the cool air wash over me. I didn't open the will. Not yet. Instead, I scrolled through old voicemails, Grandma's voice soft, lilting, always ending with a laugh. My chest tightened. I hadn't heard that laugh in months, but it still held power. "If she could see this now," I whispered into the night. And in that moment, something hardened inside me, not out of spite, but clarity. They could write me out of the slideshow, the obituary, the rooms of a house, but they couldn't erase the truth. The world would see me. What I didn't know then, what none of them could predict, was that the next betrayal wouldn't come in whispers behind closed doors. It would come in public, and it would be televised. The motel room smelled faintly of mildew and something synthetic, like fake lemon cleaner masking years of spilled secrets. I hadn't slept much. The cheap lamp on the side table flickered every so often, casting my shadow across the wall in shaky silhouettes. My eyes stayed glued to my phone's screen, the brightness turned low, my thumb hovering over every notification that popped up. Each vibration rattled my nerves. By morning, I was numb. I left just before 8 and drove to the diner on Maybank Highway, the kind of place where truckers, night nurses, and locals all nodded at each other like they belonged to some small-town secret. I used to feel comfort there, safe in my routines. Today, everything was different. As I stepped inside, the smell of coffee and burnt bacon hit me first. A familiar waitress waved vaguely in my direction. Some of the regulars looked up from their mugs. One man paused mid-bite, fork hovering, eyes locked on me like I'd walked in wearing a scandal. I took a booth by the window and ordered scrambled eggs and toast without looking at the menu. My stomach wasn't ready for food, but I needed something normal. Something solid. Then it began. My phone vibrated on the table, once, then again. Then again. Buzz. 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 Like a hornet's nest cracked open. When I finally looked, my screen was flooded. Notifications. Mentions. Private messages. Group chats I'd forgotten I was in. At the top of it all, Bryn's Instagram reel. A soft-focused video of her standing by a rose bush in black, backlit like a grieving angel. The audio faded in. Not all that cries at funerals are grieving, some just got what they wanted. Her voice. My grandmother's roses. The same flowers from the funeral. The implications weren't even subtle. Comments poured in below. She's talking about her sister, right? This is beyond cruel. You don't air this stuff online. Wait, didn't the other girl get the inheritance? She's just bitter. No, she knows something. Public Enemy 1. SMH. I felt heat creep up my neck. I typed out a reply. That's false. You know that. But before hitting send, I stopped. Stared. Deleted it. Engaging would only feed the fire. I called Bryn. No answer. I called Mom. Straight to voicemail. The silence was louder than any scream. When I looked up from the screen, the diner had gone quiet. People weren't even pretending anymore. One woman leaned toward her companion, whispering clearly about me. A man behind the counter picked up his phone, not subtly at all. My heart thudded. I dropped a 20 on the table and walked out fast. In the car, I slammed the door and punched Lucian's number. He picked up on the second ring. I've seen it, he said before I could even speak. Lucian, this is out of control. They're dragging me in the dirt. He exhaled. This was always going to happen. Right now, you're not a person, you're a headline. A narrative people want to control. She's making me look like I manipulated Grandma. Like I stole. He paused. And if you fight back publicly right now, it'll look defensive. Let the dust settle. We're preparing our own timeline. Receipts. Statements. When we speak, it'll be strategic. I swallowed. First they erase me. Now they frame me. When does the mask drop? When we pull it off ourselves, he said. Hold tight. After hanging up, I slumped in the seat and stared at the dashboard, watching the digital clock tick. 9:14 a.m. I barely noticed the new email until the vibration made me flinch. It was from the Harper Foundation. One sentence stood out like it was branded onto my retinas. Pending review. Your involvement is under reconsideration. The irony made my throat tighten. Their tagline, Integrity First, sat beneath the signature. I laughed bitterly. Integrity. That's what they said they stood for. But one vague whisper online, and suddenly I was radioactive. I needed to get out. Away. So I drove. No destination. No plan, just a direction. I followed the back roads until I reached Sullivan's Island. The air shifted as I neared the water, salt sharp in my nose. I parked by the beach where Grandma used to take me as a child, back when the world was simple and my name wasn't tangled in headlines. The beach was quiet. I opened my phone, stared at the apps blinking at me like needy children. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, all of them pulsing with chaos. I tapped, held deleted, one by one. No more headlines. No more venom through a 6-inch screen. Then, I shoved the phone deep into the glove compartment and sat back, breathing in the stillness. The tide was low. The sun had begun to warm the sand. I whispered out loud, a vow to no one and everyone. This ends now, one way or another. My voice didn't shake. For the first time in days, I felt something close to clarity. Not revenge. Not sadness. Resolve. I sat there for a long time, watching the waves roll in and erase every footprint they touched. Soon I would do the same. The morning mist clung to the sidewalks of King Street as I stepped out of my car. Fog curled around the lampposts, and the cold air stung sharper than usual. My hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel even after I'd turned off the engine. Bryn's voice echoed in my mind, the reel she just posted playing over and over again. Not all that cries are grieving. She'd used my grief, my grandmother's death, my silence, and turned it into a social media performance. Inside the cafe, the The buzz of espresso machines blended with low conversation and the faint drone of the television. Headlines crawled across the screen above the counter. Beaumont heir versus family legacy. Charleston inheritance, war erupts. I spotted Lucian at a back table, already buried in paperwork. His eyes met mine, and the concern there nearly unraveled me. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, sliding into the chair across from him. "I think you'll want to see this," he said softly, tapping a key on his laptop. The cafe TV screen mirrored his feed. A Charleston local news feature had begun. The Callista Foundation, Legacy in Action. The screen cut to a shining hall and a stage lined with donors. Then I saw her, Bryn, dressed in soft lavender, clutching the microphone like she belonged there. She stepped up to the podium as the banner behind her flashed. Callista Health Initiative. My throat tightened. "Good evening," she began, smiling for the cameras. "I'm Bryn Beaumont. It has always been my passion to carry forward my grandmother's dream of building accessible healthcare for all." I blinked hard. I recognized every word she said next. She presented blueprints, my blueprints. She spoke about the clinic Grandma and I had planned together, how it would serve underserved communities, offer mental health resources, and expand rural outreach. She credited herself for the donors, the design, even the location. Lucian exhaled beside me. "We should have protected it, but without filing the papers officially. It's gray area." "She stole it," I whispered, gripping my coffee cup until my knuckles turned white. "She took my work, my memories with Grandma, and packaged them like a TED Talk." Lucian leaned in. "It's not just about credit anymore. This is reputation warfare." I stood without finishing my drink. The air outside was colder than before. My phone buzzed with notifications. I glanced down. Beaumont betrayal. Daughter cut out of family vision. Silent no more. Bryn Beaumont steps into matriarch's shoes. The city was eating it up. I drove, letting instinct take the wheel, and found myself at the old hospital where I used to volunteer with Grandma. It hadn't changed. The same beige walls, the smell of antiseptic, the quiet clatter of nurses' shoes in the hall. The memories felt sacred here. I spotted Miss Taylor at the lobby desk, an older nurse who once called me her shadow for always being 2 steps behind Grandma. "Miss Taylor?" I asked cautiously. She looked up, surprised. "Rihanna? Are you the one?" Her words caught. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry about all this." I nodded. "Tell me the truth. Did they erase me from the project?" She looked around, then leaned in. "The board met yesterday. They said you were too controversial, that they'd be moving forward with a more stable spokesperson. Bryn offered to absorb your role under her foundation's umbrella." "I didn't step away," I whispered. "They pushed me out." "You were the only one who came here every weekend," she said gently. "Your grandma knew your heart. But this is politics now. Careful, Rihanna. It's getting ugly." Back in my motel room, I paced the thin carpet, memories of Grandma swirling through my mind. The night she told me she believed in me. The summer she'd smiled and said, "You're not built for finance, you're built for people." I grabbed the folder I kept with our plans, my original blueprints, sketches, signed documents. I compared them to the images from Bryn's presentation. Identical. Every mark, every date. Fury simmered beneath my ribs. I called Vera, the foundation's former director, now apparently Bryn's new puppet. "Vera, I didn't authorize any of this. Those were my designs. You know that." A long silence. Then, coldly, "Everything in that portfolio was discussed publicly in meetings you invited us to. You never copyrighted it. I'm sorry you feel excluded, but you can't own an idea." I clenched my jaw. "You're twisting the truth." She chuckled, that condescending laugh. "Facts are just what people believe now. And right now, people believe in Bryn. You're not going to win. You'll fade." She hung up before I could respond. I sat on the bed, stunned. Then I picked up my phone and texted Lucian. "We need a plan. Today." His reply was instant. "I'm pulling every legal lever I have." As evening fell, the city outside flickered with light. Cars crawled through intersections like fireflies trapped in glass. I opened the curtains and held my blueprint close. They'd stolen my name, my future, my voice. But not my fire, If they want a war, I whispered, I'll build a battleground. And so I laid the first brick, not out of revenge, but to reclaim what was mine. It began quietly. Early morning, just before sunrise, I sat at my motel's tiny desk, the smell of instant coffee filling the air, and typed the first document, the Callista Wellness Foundation. It was official, stamped and registered in the state of South Carolina. I stared at the form for a long time before clicking submit. It felt grounding. This wasn't about the money, or the estate, or the Beaumont name plastered across headlines. This was about Callista, the woman who once whispered to me that legacy wasn't built in marble halls but in the moments you choose to care. Within a week, I signed a short lease on a modest red brick building off King Street. The place used to be a dental office, outdated wallpaper, faded linoleum floors, and a sign out front that still read Family Smiles. Fitting, I thought. I spent 3 days scrubbing it clean with the help of 2 volunteers who'd once worked with Grandma at her old clinic. When the first local reporter came by, I was wearing paint-stained jeans, hair tied back, and holding a hammer. She smiled, surprised. Are you the Beaumont heiress? I'm Callista's granddaughter, I corrected gently. That's the only title that matters here. The next morning, a small news piece aired. No tabloids, no drama, just a clean human interest story. It showed me standing under the banner I'd hung myself, the Callista Wellness Foundation, healing hands for every home. For 48 hours, the silence that followed felt peaceful. I almost believed it would last. Then came the first strike. Vera called into a radio program the following day, her voice cool and composed. It's a touching gesture, she said. But my daughter has a history of twisting sentiment into self-promotion. That building, it's just another vanity project. My mother would have never approved of how she's using the family name. The host murmured politely, but I could hear the smirk in their tone. They didn't care if it was true, only that it was juicy. Within hours, the comments online swelled again. She's trying to buy sympathy. Another rich girl pretending to be a savior. By nightfall, someone had spray-painted the word opportunist in thick black letters across the foundation's front door. I stood there staring at it the next morning, the faint smell of paint still fresh in the air. A jogger slowed nearby, glanced at me, then at the vandalism, and shook his head. It wasn't rage that hit me first, it was exhaustion. A deep, dull ache in the chest that comes when you realize that decency is no longer the loudest voice in the room. That evening, I sat alone in the office, the hum of the old refrigerator echoing through the empty halls. I opened my laptop, hit record, and spoke directly into the small, flickering webcam light. I've stayed quiet to protect what little peace I had left, I began. But silence can sound a lot like guilt if you let others narrate your life. So here's mine in my own words. I paused, swallowing the lump in my throat. My grandmother taught me that service isn't performance. It's work, sometimes hard, often thankless. I'm here to continue that, not to compete with anyone. But I won't stand silent while people twist her legacy or my name into something ugly. I didn't script it. I didn't edit it. I just clicked post. By morning, it had over 2 million views. The comments were divided, half calling me brave, half calling me fake. But the tide was shifting. I could feel it. That afternoon, I received a call from Mrs. Chandler, one of Grandma's dearest friends, a retired nurse who'd helped run the first mobile clinic 40 years ago. Her voice trembled through the line. Child, I saw your video. You sound just like her, that fire, that calm. She'd be proud. I smiled, blinking fast. I don't know if I can keep fighting them. Oh, honey, she said softly. You don't fight them. You outlast them. The next week, 5 of Grandma's old partners joined my cause. They stood beside me at the press table, silver hair and worn hands, speaking gently about Callista's work and my heart for it. One even held up an old photo of me at age 8, handing out bandages at a charity fair. She always said, Mrs. Chandler murmured to the reporters, that Rihanna was the only one who really listened. Something about that line, the only one who listened, went viral. It was replayed, quoted, and suddenly the narrative changed. News anchors started saying things like the misunderstood heiress and the granddaughter carrying on a legacy of compassion. For once, I didn't feel like the villain. 2 days later, we held a ribbon-cutting ceremony. The building wasn't finished, There were still bare walls and boxes everywhere, but the heart of it was alive. Volunteers, nurses, families from the neighborhood came, clapping politely as I stood before the small crowd. My palms were sweaty as I took the scissors. Reporters leaned forward, cameras flashing. I took a breath, looked up at the sky, and whispered, "This is for you, Grandma." Then I cut the ribbon. The crowd applauded, modest but sincere. For the first time in months, I smiled. But when the applause faded and people began mingling, I noticed a sleek black car idling across the street. The tinted window rolled down just enough for me to see Vera's face, calm, collected, unreadable. She didn't step out. She didn't wave. She just watched. I held her gaze, refusing to look away. When the car finally pulled off, I whispered under my breath, "Your move, Vera." And she made it, faster than I expected, and far more viciously. And Vera made her move, with something I never expected, forged documents. It was early the next morning when I heard the knock. Sharp, impatient. It wasn't a neighbor or a friend. It was the kind of knock that carried paperwork and bad news. When I opened the door, a man in a khaki courier uniform stood there, clipboard in hand. "Miss Beaumont?" "Yes." "Certified delivery from Charleston Probate Court." He handed over a thick envelope, sealed in official blue tape. I thanked him quietly, closed the door, and stared at it for a long moment. My reflection in the brass doorknob looked as anxious as I felt. When I finally tore it open, the first line nearly knocked the air out of me. "Notice of contest. Estate of Callista Beaumont. New will submitted for probate review." I sank onto the couch. There, stapled neatly behind the notice, was a copy of the new will. According to the document, I was not only disinherited, I was accused of emotional manipulation and abuse against my grandmother. It claimed I'd taken advantage of her in her declining state, isolating her from the rest of the family. I read it twice, then a third time, because my brain refused to accept what my eyes saw. It wasn't just the words. It was the signature. My grandmother's name, Callista M. Beaumont, scrawled in a style almost right, but off just enough that it felt like a ghost trying to impersonate her. I could picture Vera sitting at her mahogany desk, instructing some low-rent forger to practice that signature a dozen times until it looked close enough to pass casual inspection. But courts didn't run on instinct, they ran on evidence. The notice continued. Until the validity of this document is determined, all estate assets, trusts, and disbursements are to be frozen. Every word hit like a nail hammered into the coffin of everything I'd built since the funeral. By noon, I was in Lucian's office, the familiar smell of his cologne mixing with the faint scent of printer ink. He was already reading through the documents, glasses sliding down his nose. "She's playing dirty," he said simply. I let out a humorless laugh. "She's playing desperate." He looked up, eyes soft but firm. "Desperation makes people dangerous." We brought in a forensic analyst that afternoon, a woman named Dr. Lee, methodical, no-nonsense, with hands that never seemed to tremble. She laid the two wills side by side under a magnifying lamp. "Different ink," she murmured. "The real one used archival black. This one's oil-based blue, manufactured after the date of death." Lucian nodded, taking notes. "And the paper?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "Wrong fiber blend. You can fake a signature, but you can't fake time." I leaned back in my chair. For the first time that day, a flicker of relief sparked in my chest. "So we can prove it." "Easily," she said. "But it'll take time for the court to process the evidence." Time, the one luxury I didn't have. The freeze meant no funding for the foundation, no access to accounts, no ability to pay staff or maintain operations. That night, I drafted an email to Vera. It was short, cold, and deliberate. Subject: cease and desist. You have crossed into criminal territory. Withdraw your false filing or face full litigation. I will not negotiate with liars. I copied Bryn because I wanted her to see the line drawn. Then I hit send. An hour later, Lucian called. They've received it, but Rihanna, the press, just got wind of the filing. I turned on the television. There it was, my face under bold headlines. Beaumont family implodes. Heiress accused of forgery. A reporter outside the courthouse was already speculating about a pattern of deception and family estrangement. I muted the TV, sat on the edge of my bed, and breathed slowly. My grandmother's portrait leaned against the wall beside the nightstand. I'd never hung it, afraid of breaking the glass. Her eyes seemed to look right through me, calm, patient. I whispered, "You always said the truth doesn't need to shout. But I think it's time it learned how to roar." The next morning, I filed an emergency injunction, not just to protect the estate, but to protect the foundation's name. I refused to let Vera use the same bloodline that built this legacy to poison it. Lucian prepared a public statement. I read it once, then pushed it aside. "No," I said. "I'll write my own." By that afternoon, the video was live. I stood in the same office where the spray-painted word opportunist had once stained the front door. The wall behind me was freshly painted white, clean, strong, defiant. I looked into the camera and spoke. "I'm not here to fight for money. I'm here to fight for truth. My grandmother's signature doesn't bend to forgery, and neither do I. If you push again, I will push back, not out of anger, but out of love for the woman who raised me to stand tall when others tried to bury me." It spread faster than anything before it. Within 24 hours, it was all over local news, split screens of my statement, and Vera walking briskly into the courthouse, reporters shouting questions she refused to answer. Social media buzzed with theories. Some defended me, calling out Vera's pattern of control. Others wondered aloud how deep the family feud went. That evening, my phone buzzed with a private notification. No number, just an email subject line. "I have something that will help you from inside." I stared at it for a long moment before opening the message. There was a single attachment, one file. No explanation, no signature. Just a note at the bottom of the message that read, "She lied to you both." My hand hovered over the mouse. Part of me hesitated. Another trap, maybe. But the other part, the one that had survived every public beating, whispered, "Click it." I double-clicked the file, heart pounding. What opened on my screen changed everything, and finally gave me a weapon. I stared at the video file like it might reach out and burn me. My breath caught somewhere between disbelief and rage. The grainy footage played on a loop, the harsh audio slurring out words that felt like knives. Vera's voice. I hadn't heard her speak in weeks, at least not directly. But there she was, in all her venomous clarity, caught forever in a recording she never meant anyone to hear. "That girl won't get a cent," she said, lips curled in disgust. "I'll rewrite the will behind closed doors. She doesn't deserve to carry my mother's name." A bitter laugh followed, sharp, hollow. The glass in her hand glinted, half empty, sloshing as she leaned back, bourbon slurring her speech. Then, with a sneer that chilled me to the bone, "Let her cry in public. It makes me look sympathetic." I sat back, the laptop's glow casting strange shadows across the motel room. I was trembling, not from fear but something colder. Not because she lied, because this time I had proof. Tangible, undeniable. I didn't know how long I sat there. My heartbeat felt like a drum against my ribs. But when my phone vibrated on the nightstand, the jolt brought me back. I closed the laptop, snapped the USB into its port, and stood up. This time I wouldn't run. By mid-morning, I was outside Lucian's office. He opened the door, bleary-eyed but alert. He always seemed half a step ahead of everything, yet never surprised. I handed him the USB. "This is what changed," I said. He gave me a sharp look but said nothing. Instead, he walked to his desk, plugged the drive in, and opened the file. We both watched in silence. Vera's voice spilled into the room like poison gas. The clip lasted under 2 minutes. But the impact? Nuclear. Lucian leaned back slowly, his fingers steepled against his lips. "This is Sable's work, isn't it?" he asked, eyes narrowing. I nodded. "Has to be. She vanished right after the funeral." Sable. Grandma's nurse. The woman nobody paid attention to, not really. She had that gentle, careful way of moving, of listening. I thought she just drifted out of our lives after Grandma passed. Now I realized she'd been watching, waiting, recording. Later that afternoon, Lucian and I cross-referenced every possible detail. The timestamp aligned with Vera's documented handwriting style, and the ambient hum in the background matched the air filtration system's night setting in the estate office. Even the stories Vera referenced, subtle digs, petty threats, were things only someone inside that house could have known. It was real. We sent it to 3 carefully selected news outlets. 1 local, 1 statewide, and 1 national. Quietly, anonymously. No press conference. No declarations. Just the truth. By dinner, the video was everywhere. It aired on evening news and diners, showed up on trending TikToks, was shared on Facebook by people who'd never met me but suddenly said my name with fury in their eyes. The hashtag surged. Justice for Callista. Rihanna deserves better. It was overwhelming. Part of me wanted to crawl under the bed, block it all out. But I didn't. I stayed in that motel room, watching the tidal wave rise. Influencers dissected the audio. Legal analysts questioned whether the will could now be challenged. Talk shows debated Vera's character, her motivations, her capacity for cruelty. Clips of her past interviews, so polished, so rehearsed, played side by side with the raw footage of her drunken scheming. The internet turned. Suddenly, I wasn't the invisible granddaughter anymore. I was the rightful heir, the one who'd been betrayed. And people, millions of them, wanted to see justice done. Vera, on the other hand, vanished. No public statements, no interviews, just silence. Bryn tried damage control. She posted a shaky statement to her social media. I had no idea that was recorded. I love my family and hope we can heal privately. But it was too late. Sponsors began pulling out of their contracts. Board members of Vera's charities resigned. Former allies turned into cautious ghosts. That carefully curated image of power and elegance cracked open, revealing a woman who built an empire on manipulation. And me. I sat outside that night on the motel's tiny wooden porch, wrapped in a worn blanket, laptop in my lap. The night air was thick with salt, the wind tugging gently at my sleeves. A distant freight train sounded like thunder rolling in reverse. I watched the story unfold in real time. The internet, for once, wasn't just noise. It was justice. Then, just before midnight, my phone lit up with a single message. Ready when you are. No name. But I knew who it was from. Lucian. He was waiting. And now, so was the world. I stared out into the dark, heart steady for the first time in weeks. The time for hiding had ended. I typed 2 words back. Let's begin. And hit send. I sat in the dim motel room, the only sound a faint buzz from the cheap wall heater and the soft spin of my phone charger on the desk. My hands trembled as I plugged the USB into my laptop. The file transfer bar blinked blue. Outside, the world was already watching. Across the street, morning news vans crowded the curb in front of the Callista Wellness Center. Reporters leaned over their cameras, fixing their hair, testing their mics. I glanced at the final tweet I had drafted. My thumb hovered before I hit send. I will be speaking at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Truth will be heard. No turning back now. From the window, I could see construction workers still hoisting signage onto the building's glass facade. The center was supposed to be a beacon of new beginnings. Now it was about to become the backdrop to a very different kind of rebirth. One not wrapped in ribbon-cutting smiles or PR photo ops, but one ripped open in truth. All afternoon, I paced behind the lobby curtains. Lucian, my attorney, stood nearby, calm and unreadable in his charcoal suit. The room buzzed with camera crews adjusting lighting and reporters murmuring into their recorders. Outside, the sidewalk teemed with curious bystanders. The scent of coffee and anxiety was everywhere. You're ready, Lucian whispered, touching my arm. I wasn't sure if I was. My chest was tight, my mouth dry, but I nodded and stepped forward. The room fell silent. A wall of cameras faced me. I gripped the edges of the podium and leaned toward the mic. My voice cracked, but I didn't let it stop me. Good evening. Thank you for being here. A few camera flashes went off. Someone cleared their throat. I never asked for $10 billion, I said. What I asked for was far simpler, to be acknowledged, to be treated like I mattered. I paused. My heart thudded against my ribs. When my grandmother made me her sole heir, I didn't expect applause. I expected resistance. But what I received was betrayal, betrayal masked as family. I told them about the quiet manipulation, the isolation, the gaslighting that tried to frame me as unstable, undeserving. I spoke of Grandma Eloise, her handwritten letters, her trust in me, the way she looked at me when I spoke of helping others, building something that lasted. They tried to erase me, I said softly, to scrub me out of every story, to twist my compassion into weakness. But I didn't come here to accuse. I came to speak. Then I nodded to Lucian. The massive screen behind me lit up. Gasps rippled through the audience. It was her. Vera's voice, raw and unfiltered, played across the hall. That girl won't see a dime, she sneered. She doesn't deserve to carry my mother's name. Then came the damning laugh, cold, triumphant. She named names, spoke of orchestrated leaks, late-night meetings, legal traps. One by one, every lie began to unravel. The audience stirred, some visibly shocked. Journalists scrambled to capture every word. I stood motionless, letting the truth do the talking. This, I said quietly when the clip ended, is not about revenge. This is about reclaiming something stolen, dignity. Because once truth is spoken, it has a power no lie can touch. Applause erupted, a wall of sound that seemed to lift the room. For the first time in weeks, I felt air in my lungs again. As I walked off stage, the flash of cameras followed, reporters shouting questions I didn't need to answer anymore. The headlines began to appear on phone screens like a digital wave. Beaumont breaks silence. Truth at 10 billion. The heir strikes back. By nightfall, the internet had done its job. The clip of Vera's confession went viral in hours. Celebrities reposted it. Advocacy groups released statements of solidarity. One political commentator even called it a masterclass in how to confront well-fueled gaslighting. I sat alone on the balcony behind the center, a blanket around my shoulders, watching the lights of downtown blink against the night. For the first time, the silence didn't feel suffocating, it felt earned. Bryn's PR firm issued a rushed statement the same evening, claiming they had been misled about the situation and were cutting ties with Vera indefinitely. Sable's endorsement deals began vanishing like smoke. Her campaign team released a vague message about her needing time for personal reflection. Even the family's official social media accounts went dark. Then my phone buzzed. It was a voice message, no caller ID. I hesitated, then pressed play. Vera. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Shaky. Raw. I never thought you'd actually do it, she said. There was a pause. You were always the quiet one. Always the obedient one. I didn't think you'd fight back. She sniffled. Was she crying? I don't know what happens now. I don't even know if you'll hear this. But I'm sorry. Not just for the money. For everything. For making you feel like nothing. Silence. Then the message ended. I stared at the screen, the weight of everything pressing in again. The war wasn't over, but this right now was a victory. A loud, public, irreversible victory. The kind you don't clap back from. The kind that echoes. The kind that drops the mic and walks away. It was just past midnight when I heard the sound. Not a knock. Not even a message alert. Just a soft vibration on the nightstand, a single voicemail notification. I blinked against the dim light, disoriented. But when I saw her name, everything snapped into clarity. Vera. I sat upright, breath caught in my throat. For a second, I hesitated, part of me wanting to delete it without listening. But my fingers moved faster than my doubts. Her voice came through the speaker, husky, trembling, stripped of the superiority it always carried. Rihanna, I don't expect you to forgive me. I needed you to know I was wrong. That was all. No excuses. No begging. Just 7 seconds of vulnerability from the woman who had spent years pretending I didn't matter. Or worse, that I owed her everything. I replayed the message twice, gripping the phone as if it might disappear. I thought of every holiday I'd spent alone. Every time she called me ungrateful. Every moment she stood beside Bryn, weaponizing silence and entitlement. But this was not the voice of power. It was the sound of someone unraveling, alone in the dark. I didn't reply. The morning came like a verdict. The judge's ruling echoed through the courtroom. The forged will was declared invalid. The evidence we gathered was clear, undeniable. Signatures, timestamps, digital trails. Vera and Bryn had not only lied, they tried to erase my grandmother's final wishes. They lost everything. The court ordered them removed from the estate trust. Their access to funds, property, and decision-making power was stripped away. What they tried to steal had slipped through their fingers, and now, even their reputations couldn't shield them. Philanthropic boards I used to volunteer with released public statements distancing themselves from both of them. Bryn's brand, all glossy photos and fake humility, crumbled in days. Sponsors pulled out. Her follower count plunged. She went from a trending name to a cautionary tale. As for Vera, she vanished from the social scene. No more brunches, no fundraisers, no press. Just silence. I wore navy blue to the final court appearance. Simple, unadorned. The kind of color that didn't need to scream. The court gave me full control of the estate. Every penny, every acre, every share. And yet, I didn't take it all. Instead, I signed one final agreement, a redistribution. I returned a modest portion of the liquid assets and one piece of land. It was fair. Enough for them to start again, if they ever chose to live honestly, but not enough to reward what they'd done. I never needed the billions, I said quietly. I only needed the truth. The judge nodded. The lawyers watched. Cameras flashed as I left the courthouse, but I kept my head high. I didn't walk out as a victor. I walked out as someone finally free. That evening, headlines bloomed like wildflowers. Beaumont heir rejects fortune, chooses integrity. Charity over cash. Rihanna's final move stuns public. But I didn't care about the headlines anymore. I cared about what came next. The Callista Wellness Foundation expanded faster than we expected. One clinic became 4, stretching into rural corners of Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, and the Carolinas. We offered free checkups, mobile counseling vans, mental health programs, even fresh food deliveries in health deserts. In those spaces, I saw something I hadn't in years, joy. A little girl in Atlanta held my hand after her exam and said, "You look like the lady in the brochure." I laughed. She gave me a sticker. That was worth more than any inheritance. Exactly 1 year after the final court date, I returned to where it started. The cemetery was quiet that morning. Soft sun, dew on the grass. I carried a small bouquet of white roses, her favorite. The petals trembled in the wind as I knelt beside the polished headstone. Her name shimmered against the stone, Callista Rose Beaumont. I placed the bouquet down and let my hand rest on the cool granite. "I hope I made you proud," I whispered. In the silence that followed, a breeze passed behind me, gentle, almost like a breath. I closed my eyes and let the warmth of the sun touch my face. Vera never contacted me again. No calls, no messages, no surprise visits. Maybe she moved somewhere else. Maybe she finally faced herself. Or maybe she simply disappeared into her own shame. I don't know, and I don't need to. I walked away from that grave without bitterness. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to see them suffer. I just needed space to rebuild what they broke. Some wounds don't heal with justice or apologies. Some heal quietly, with light, with time, with choosing to let go. I walked forward, not untouched, but whole. Sometimes, the deepest wounds come not from strangers, but from the people who once tucked us in at night. This story isn't just about money. It's about choosing dignity over control, truth over silence, and healing over revenge. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you love just to protect your peace? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your story.